Welcome to the Training Project podcast where health, fitness, and training collide. And each week I'm trying to bring you guys just real conversations with people out there in the industry. Let's call them so-called experts in different areas, just to help you guys grow as either a coach, a trainer, or, an athlete if you consider yourself to be one. And speaking of considering themselves to be athletes, Clif Harski, how you doing?
Doing well.
I'm glad to have you on here, man. You know what? Selfishly for me, Cliff, as I was talking to you before we threw the record button on, it's just my opportunity to get to know people better. And you're someone who, I've kind of secretly or maybe not so secretly been stalking in the industry for a while. I think maybe I met you initially. I think we were like hanging, chilling with like Mark Fisher at some event. I don't even remember what industry event, but I think that might have been the first time we crossed paths.
Got it. Yeah.
Yep.
Long time ago. But the real connection point would have been December 2020 in Orlando at BioFit.
Yeah, I mean, I had and for any of you guys listening who are not connected to or don't know about the legend that is Clif Harski, from my understanding, Cliff, maybe you've taught like the most industry certifications of any human ever.
Yeah, it might be me. It might be Jason C. Brown, who I used to work for. And the little caveat is he had a company called Kettlebell Athletics, and he had the in-house certification for kettlebells with Equinox. And so he was 15, 16 years doing that. So by sheer volume, he maybe did it. But I've done it across 5 different companies now. So I'm pushing 500.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, hey, from going to lots of workshops and connect with people, that's one of the topics I want to try to pull out the most maybe with you today is just, like you've had the opportunity to be a part of a lot of different systems of different kinds, right? And you're a former athlete, right? I mean, a real athlete. Would you play basketball in college?
I played basketball in college, and I don't want to brag, but my high school year, senior year, I won Athlete of the Year. So I've got the trophy. It's up on my bookshelf.
There's a reason
Pretty
that we're
amazing.
here. And then, I'm not sure that your path took you right into fitness and training. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, which now that I found this out, I'm like, I am not surprised at all that this guy worked for Trader Joe's
For 10 years, I
for
worked for
10
Trader
years.
Joe's.
You know what? That's why you go into Trader Joe's and you're like, how the fuck is everybody so nice?
That was a fun job. I still fantasize when I shop there weekly, and I still fantasize about being on the checkout stand, just screwing with people about what they ate.
I love that, man. I love it. Well, so let's talk more, what your life is all about now, fitness, training, health, the different organizations you've worked for. Now, like you mentioned, I think we maybe got to spend a little more time together where I was kind of like one of the 3 or 4 awkward behind the video people at it was like the first, I feel like it was maybe like the first course you guys ran post pandemic, but it was virtual, right?
It was our first online course. So we had been running a ton, just an inordinate amount of in person courses. And it was that second lockdown period. And we were like, we got to sell something. So let's do it online. There's a lot of pent up demand
Yep.
from everyone that was scared to actually go to a room with people in it and travel. And so we did the online. And being that it was in Orlando, we had you, Trevor McQuillan, and maybe like 1 or 2 other people
There's a
that were
few.
there in person. Mostly it was our staff so that we had demos. And yeah, that was the first.
So that being said, I mean, especially, working with MovNat, I mean, obviously all your kettlebell experience with Kettlebell Athletics and then now that, FKT, and I'm sure FitWall, you've worked in a wide variety of different, I would say training styles, and maybe there's some elements of consistency that most people don't see amongst all those things. But, here we are, we're 2025. You've been training for quite a while now, right? A couple years. How would you describe your training style? Like, how do you answer that?
To be athletic. And like I think it's distilled for a long time. I would answer this type of question with my measure of success in training is how does it make me feel on the basketball court? So do I feel like I'm more explosive? Do I feel like I could change direction? Do I feel strong enough to push back against bigger guys trying to back me down? Do I feel like I'm springy and can jump or maybe still dunk? So that was always my measure. Success meant better athletic performance. Now that I don't play basketball 5-on-5 because I'm about to turn 43 next week, and I don't trust adult men to play with without them hurting me, especially
Yep.
because I'm still a little bit faster than most of them. And that just pisses them off. And so they tend to undercut and foul. It's not worth the injury risk. I have a big torn meniscus that I've had for a number of years since I teach regularly, travel and teach. I can't afford to re-aggravate or actually injure myself. So I don't really have the test of basketball being, oh, I'm improved on the court, but I can 100% recreate, maybe not 100%, but I can, to a large extent, recreate athletic challenges in a controlled environment, aka the gym, to try to get stimulus that feels like athletic situations, whether that be a basketball court, a volleyball court, tennis, pickleball, whatever the hell you want to do. And that's what I like to do. I want to feel like I'm capable of a lot of stuff. And that's a very broad way to describe it, of course. But that means, can I move my goddamn feet and not fall over? Or do I look like a drunk Bambi that doesn't know how to walk yet? So I prioritize the through line to kettlebells, MovNat, FitWall, everything has been a movement competency through line. Can you move like an athlete to some extent, even if you're not actively playing sports? And I say that specifically because I always get a little bit irritated with the young dude bros that are like, if you want to be athletic, go play a sport. I'm like, look, man, I got two kids that are in elementary school and we have a busy ass schedule. I can't just take off for 2 hours and risk injury in a true chaotic environment. That just isn't how adulthood works for most human beings. And so that's me. Imagine your regular ass adult that hasn't done anything athletic for 10 years. Telling that person, if you want to get athletic, go play soccer, is absolutely guaranteed injury for that person.
Yeah.
I'm not an injury alarmist, but I'm very comfortable saying if you're an adult and you go play pickup sports after years of not doing it, you will get injured.
100%. That's the only, man, that's the one thing. I used to work full time for FAU, before I broke off and like started the gym and started Axiom. And I would play pickleball 3 or 4 days a week. And there's nothing that I miss more, but I've been invited in the last like couple of years. People are like, oh, Joe, come out and play some. We got this like flag football league. And I'm like, I know myself. I know myself.
You're not
And
going
like,
slow.
no, it's not going slow. I'm getting out there and I'm trying to break someone's ankles. I'm going to break my own ankles is what's going to happen. I'm going to fuck something up and it's not going to be good.
Yeah. So it's always funny to me when the holier than thou, naive, really, younger dudes mostly are like, just go play a real sport. And you're like, dude, you're an idiot. You're 24, 28. You're single. You can go do this. I did it until I was
Yeah,
38.
for sure.
And I would love to. If I still didn't have the time commitments and things I do now, I would absolutely love to still do it. Shit changes.
Yeah. 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 And I think that's obviously there's a huge push. I was actually talking with Russin about this as well, like longevity, and people are like, man, sprinting is like the best thing you can do. How do you feel about that advice?
Um, I'll reference a 2010 blog post that I put up where I was deep in the paleo scene, and which was hand in hand with CrossFit at the time. And Mark's Daily Apple, Primal Blueprint, was a big thing at the time.
For sure.
Mark is a big sprint proponent. Now he's subdued that a little bit over the years, but at that point he was huge on it. And I put up an article. I was like, hey, I think sprinting is a great goal, but a stupid idea, at least to start with. If you want to get started, sprint in the sand if you can, or sprint uphill. Both of these things slow you down, shorten your stride length, limiting the injury factor. And for most adults, the injury guarantee that you're going to have on your hammies first, Achilles calf, and adductors. I giggle a little bit at all the adult sport guys or S&C wannabe guys that are taking up sprinting and just have a nagging hamstring issue perpetually. And I'm like, that's beautiful. I understand why on paper, all this celebratory attitude towards sprinting. But man, if you haven't done it for a few years, it's like ramp up for like a year and then go ahead for it. What's his name? Is it Berardi that's been chasing sprinting a ton and is
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah, yeah.
perpetually hurt?
Yeah, had a
I'm like,
plantar fasciitis and all kinds of, and there's someone who probably was like training appropriately, right? And even with all that, like, dealing with these injuries.
it's not it's not easy on the body. Like the reason it's good is it's hard on the body, but it's hard on the body.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. So I feel like I've heard like I said at the beginning of this, I've stalked you in a number of ways over time. So I feel like this is something you've said in a couple different places, especially about your workouts. And again, obviously there's like our workouts as trainers, and then there's what we, coach and promote people. But I think the best coaches, like what we do is what we coach other people to do as well. And so I've heard you talk about like 70% the same, 30% variety, when talking about like your workout structure. So I guess with that in mind, for someone who wants to be able and athletic, which I think was like it's kind of been your catchphrase, right? Be able, be athletic. How do you program for that, right? Like, how do you balance the consistency and structure with the variety of movement?
So part of this answer comes down to where they're training. Is it a group? Is it one-on-one? Is it online? So all these play a role in that answer. Generally speaking, though, I want my 70% to be probably more of the be able. And what be able to me means is your fundamentals. These are the basics: bilateral, big lifts, compounds. They're pretty basic, which means they're loadable, which means you can chase intensity, weight, output, speed, whatever, pretty simply and track measurable progress over time. The be athletic stuff, it certainly can be intense, but a lot of times it's more coordinatively rich or challenging technical skills, whether it be Olympic weightlifting, kettlebell drills, ultimate sandbag, mace bell, body weight stuff like skipping and side shuffles, karaoke that's new for people, approach jumps. So I look at the be athletic stuff as moving well. Can you do it on purpose? Do you look like baby Bambi? Or do you look, like maybe you've moved your body once or twice in life? So the be able, I want to ride it for at least 4 weeks, if not longer. Any client I have, I'm like, let's ride it until you're either bored of doing it or we stop seeing the improvements come. Once you stop seeing the improvements come, let's switch it, unless you plan to make money or compete in that lift. Otherwise, it's just the opportunity cost of the extra effort to get another 1% a gain is not worth it to me when I could just change the drill to something new where you can make more additional progress. So 70% be able, hammer the basics. This sounds like what most S&C coaches would do. Keep it really super simple. The other 30% for me, you could almost call them non-scale victories, where as people get better at skills, they feel better about their progress because they may not care all that much. Oftentimes, I don't think clients care all that much about how much weight they're lifting, to be honest. They care about what the mirror shows. And to be honest, the mirror is going to be dependent a lot on their lifestyle and diet. So they can get really strong. When I can show them this 30% of be athletic or skill based movement that they get better, they feel better, they at least can identify tangibly that they're improving in something. Because so often, unfortunately, a lot of people don't have real easy, tangible, look, I have abs now, or big weight increases on lifts because they just don't pay attention or care.
Yeah, yeah. And so just to clarify too, for anyone who's listening, when you're talking about, you're talking about like keeping a lift for at least 4 weeks and just trying to like get stronger, push variables, whether it's you're doing more reps, you're doing more weight, you're doing more volume, like just overload that move. That's what you're saying, right?
100%. Example, last year, starting in late May, I started chasing a kettlebell Bulgarian clean. So it's just a kettlebell clean out of a Bulgarian split stance. And at the beginning, I think I was using double 53-pound kettlebells. So if your right leg is forward, you clean your opposite arm, you clean your left arm. The same side arm just hangs, called an anchor. So you're only cleaning one of the bells because cleaning outside the leg is not that awesome of a lift. And I rode that until the end of October. So 6 months. That was my Tuesday principal lower body effort. And I maxed it out cleaning the 106 pound for 3 while holding 124 on my right arm. And I'm like, there's 230 combined pounds of load in this clean. That's primarily one leg on the front leg. So 6 months, I rode the exact same lift. And then 2 weeks later, I PR'd my strength test of Bulgarian cleans. So of regular Bulgarian with an open back trap bar. And so the reason I bring it up is not just to celebrate my own Bulgarian clean victory.
We all watched.
Yeah, it was cool. I've been doing it for a while. I'm decent at knowing different exercises, and I did the same damn lift for 6 months. It's an element that's probably one of the most difficult things. I had a discussion this morning. I still teach Alpha Strong, which is the wannabe CrossFit class at Lifetime. I teach it twice a week because I like to remain good at teaching fitness to fitness consumers, because I teach coaches how to teach fitness. And so if I'm still doing it, I feel like there's a little bit more validity in me saying it.
For sure.
But it also makes sure I don't end up full of shit, making things up. Like, hypothetically, this would work. And it's like, try it out and see if it actually works. So I had somebody that was new, and she's like, we did the same list last week. And I was like, indeed we did. And that's why you looked better doing it today. And my snarky, smartass way of answering this to clients, once I know them, is, hey, look, the best athletes on earth, the best physique competitors on earth, follow a program that they repeat for multiple weeks in a row, maybe multiple months in a row. And the reason they do that is how you actually get the best progress. And so I don't know why you think you don't need to follow what the most genetically gifted people on earth follow to get better results. And she was like, that makes sense. And then I think she went to like an F45 class or something. Anyway,
she's like, I'm out. I don't care. I don't like that answer.
Yeah, because they don't care about results. They really don't. They just want to check the box. And for longevity and like, I'm slightly healthier, doing whatever the hell you want, whenever the hell you want, is better than doing nothing, certainly. But that brings, I'm trying to go full circle to the 30%. And that's where I think that combination of 70% repeat, 30% change it up is a really effective model. And to bring this into Trader Joe's, closing that loop, there's a saying at Trader Joe's called like Kaizen, make 1% better every single time. And one of the big tenets they have is that the last thing that happens at Trader Joe's is the thing people remember the most. So you can go to Trader Joe's and they're out of 7 items that you came in for because it was a limited time buy or they screwed up the order. But then the cashier is super nice, says something really doofusy, gives your kid a lollipop, and you're like, this was a great trip. So if you leave on a high and everything else, you kind of forget. So if you change the last 30% of your workout, AKA the final superset, AKA a finisher, which, Rick Mayo's called an emotional finisher for a long time. And I just blatantly steal that terminology. You can switch it up and then like, that's all I really remember.
Yeah. I think even on the training side, that's what we talk about inside some of the Axiom courses is that, like most people, I ask them what they did yesterday and they have no idea what they even did yesterday. So like the idea that they remember the entire workout from last Monday, except for your woman in class, like it's so rare. And even if it's like, I mean, what do you say? How many exercises do you think most people are getting in an hour workout on their own? Like, what do you think? What's the average? How many exercises probably?
Man, 8 to 15.
Yeah. So, I mean, so even if you kept 1/3 to 1/2, even if you kept at least that amount of consistency and like progressively overloaded that, right? You choose, to your point, maybe even if it's like you got 2 to 3 consistent exercises in that Monday workout, and then you still get to play with all the other stuff just to try to balance them both out. Cause yeah, I think a lot of people give up. I think the idea of keeping that one lift for 6 months, people are like, one exercise for 6 months, you're like, yeah, like that actually could be great for you.
Big time. Big time. And it also gives you permission to progress at a slower rate, which is going to be safer and more sustainable anyway. So rather than be like, I could go 30 pounds heavier every week, go up 10 and just slow drip it a little bit. And then you don't end up with burnt coffee because you cooked it too fast. You have a nice, slow, smooth roast. It goes down nice.
All right. So that being said, if someone's going to keep something consistent, that to me brings me to thinking about like programming and periodization, right? Like these concepts, and we learn them in a certain way inside the certification. And maybe for the average exerciser, they might not be super familiar with, like, aside from being on a program, like what periodization really is. But I guess how strategic and how periodized do most people's programs really need to be? If we are talking about, the everyday person, they are definitely trying to change their body. They're trying to get stronger. They're not out, they're not going to compete on Saturdays in football or anything else. But I guess how detailed does that level of structure need to be?
I don't, in broad general speak, I don't hardly buy into the idea of periodization for Gen Pop. So if you're not training for a thing, you don't have an end goal to work backwards from. Most classical periodization models are, I have a meet. I need to peak my 1RM for the meet of powerlifting,
Yeah.
or my fastest race or highest jump. You can't periodize for that. Or excuse me, you absolutely periodize for that. But if you just are living your general life with no particular thing to peak for, then short of coming up with your own peak week for whatever reason, there's no reason to peak or plan a periodization. I go, all right, well, what does a typical person want to be? They want to be a little bit leaner. They want to feel better. They want to have more energy, a little bit stronger. But those are like the four things. So strength training and hypertrophy gets you stronger and look leaner because you carry more muscle mass. Feel better is make sure you do enough cardio that your heart and lungs work, and mobility or full range strength training so that you can tie your shoes comfortably. More energy is just work out consistently. It'll kind of take care of itself. And so if those are the things, then you never really need to go, well, this is my power week. And if you like doing that and it gives you more consistency because you're interested in the process, that's awesome. Go for it. Like there's no negative. I think that's a cool way to say it. I don't think there's any negative to periodizing your training. Like Alpha Strong, they do an endurance, a strength, and a power phase every 3 months. And I'm like, all right, it's cute. Like most of these people could care less. They don't change their intensity throughout at all. None of it matters. If somebody comes in the wrong week, it's kind of a weird mess. But it doesn't actually hurt anything to have this as a goal. And I've seen a lot of big chains try to do this, but when I have my chain, nope, never. Every single week, I was like, we're going to train strength, power, hypertrophy. I'm going to have one day that does a lot of eccentrics and isometrics because I think positional endurance in some of these funky ranges is very powerful for people. And our blocks were every 3 weeks. I can explain that why if you want. But every 3 weeks, we had 7 new workouts. And they would get better for those 3 weeks. And then we'd switch 7 new workouts, get better for 3 weeks. That's my thoughts on periodization.
Yeah. Do you find for most people that, and I know we're talking in generalities and there's, like you said, maybe certain ways someone engages with it more. Do you think most people would be better suited trying to fit in, like you said, just these different modalities throughout the week or even inside the same session where you have like, you're doing a little bit of fast twitch, you're doing some strength quality, then you're doing some like hypertrophy work inside of a single session or separate days? What have you seen anything work one way or the other for people?
So I've played with both. I don't know as though I feel like one is markedly better than the other. Conceptually, I really dig this idea of whatever you're signaling that day, make that the thing. If it's a power day, just do power and explosiveness. That's how I train myself. I'm like, oh, this is a power to be athletic day. Everything's explodey. This is a strength day. Everything's 3 to 7. This is a hypertrophy. Everything's 8 to 15. And then you're signaling one thing, and maybe that has some benefit with a lack of interference effect. And I just don't think it's actually that important. The reason I think it could be useful for some people, going back to FitWall as an example, when I had an eccentric day and it was tempo, I was like, look, everything is at this tempo today. And it helped us manage the room a lot better. If we did a 2-to-1 protocol, you're going to go 2 on the concentric, 1 on the eccentric. If I have to teach them how to do that for one lift, I might as well do it for 3 more, because it's going to take them the whole goddamn first 2 sets just to get it.
Yeah.
And then eventually they got it. And now the next week and the week after that, they're able to push it harder. They make better results. So consistency of one effort I found to be useful. However, if somebody's only, like, that's the type of thing that works if someone's training 4 to 6 days a week. But if someone's training 2 days a week or even 3 days a week, I've only got 2 or 3 opportunities to give them a stimulus that I think is important. And if that's the case, and that's most people, 2.2 or whatever the number is, depending on the club and membership type they have, then I got to give it to them all in that session.
Yeah. Talk to me more about you mentioned a little bit about eccentrics and positional isometrics. That's something that, like, I have played around with a lot as well, but I think a lot of people aren't super familiar with either what the benefits might really be. And then even if I think there's some that maybe they understand there's some benefits, but figuring out, like, how do I actually, like, work that in to my program?
So for me, when I especially if I frame it as like positional strength, isometrics and eccentrics, we're stronger than we are concentrically. And where that can be beneficial is it lets us get exposure to muscle lengths or positions in positions that we otherwise would never get into. So for example, a number of people in a split squat, a general exercise goer, not a fitness pro, general exercise goer, they do the top half of a split squat because below that bottom half, they don't trust their own strength level to get to the floor and back up. A novice coach would say they need mobility work because they can't get to the bottom. Someone that's been around longer is like, no, they're just weak in the long positions, right? So they need strength at length. And if I had them start at the bottom, they might not be able to get up. But if I let them go slow tempo eccentric down and then pause at the bottom for 10 seconds, they're accumulating time in the lengthened positions where they need specific work. So that's one benefit, is getting stronger. Strength at length is one big benefit. Another benefit, and this is a completely different portion of the eccentric discussion, is that depending on my setup, so machines or whatever the lifts are, I can actually get a greater amount of force or overload on the body because I can handle more weight in the eccentric portion of a lift. A good example would be a row. You have a 200-pound kettlebell. All right, like most people aren't rowing a 200-pound kettlebell. However, if I use both arms to pull it up to my rib cage and then fight it down with one, I can at least put up a fight for a few seconds. Because on average, I think the number is like 120 to 140% stronger on the eccentric than you are on concentric. And so it gives you this opportunity to have a higher total amount of overload or fight. And those strength gains they're eccentric specific, but they also do have carryover to concentric. The opposite is not true. Your concentric strength gains don't always lead to more eccentric strength capability. Why is that important? Well, if you think about eccentric in this way, eccentric is your ability to break. So I have a cute saying, maybe it'll be a cool shirt sometime, like move well, move often. If you can't break, you will break. And that's RAK versus EAK. Going to your pickleball, if you can't break and change direction, you fall and hurt yourself, or at least lose the game. So we need to be able to break, and eccentric training does that for us. Specifically, fast eccentric training does that for us.
And let's just say someone's bought in. They're like, cool, I get it. This Clif guy sounds like he knows what he's talking about. I want to try some of this. I mean, for, let's say, like, minimum effective dose, how could someone toss this into their current routine in the week to get some benefit?
So my favorite way just to go with it is have a block, 4-week. And it's an important block. I know I just trashed periodization. However, for eccentric training specifically, Big negative of eccentric is the negative eccentric is crippling soreness. You get very sore on eccentric training. And it has to do with like forced stretching of the muscle itself under load that you're trying to resist if you do it right. However, if you repeat bouts, just like anything, if you repeat bouts, you get less sore and you can push harder. So when introducing eccentrics, I put a big caveat. Don't go nuts the first session because you'll have crazy DOMs. You'll be very sore and uncomfortable. And like if you happen to like want to go play pickleball on Saturday, you don't want to be super duper sore because it will negatively affect your coordination when you're super duper sore. And if your coordination is negatively impacted or the muscles are so fatigued from being sore, you are at risk for at least decreased performance, best case. Worst case, hey, if that hammy is so damn sore and not ready, then maybe you blow a hammy because it can't do what it needs to, and then you overload the connective tissue. So now that I made it sound scary, you start it really slow. Do your last set with the eccentric emphasis. Spend 5 seconds on the eccentric portion. Then the next week, do 2 sets. The next week, 3 sets. The next week, your entire exercise of bench press is done eccentric. Now, you have to think this through. Don't bench press by yourself with the eccentric focus because you might get trapped under the bar. Honestly, this could be an entire, it is a 2.5 hour section of a cert that I taught. With eccentric training, if you really want to do it well, you need to have a spotter for specific types of overloads or do them on machines. So there's specific training setups. Landmine training works really well for it because you can transition from 2 to 1 quite nicely on a lot of different lifts, where it allows you to safely have a negative that if you fail, you're not in a position to get trapped or hurt. So slowly and methodically layer it in.
All right. Well, and kind of, I feel like some of that fits in the same conversation, same vein. You said you're going to be how old this year? 43? So we're in the 40s now. You know, I feel like it wasn't maybe a couple weeks ago. I think I saw you put up an Instagram post that another dad commented at the pool that, you know, like something, I don't know, something about like, oh, you're like, you look fit, but you're not too big, right? Like you're not too jacked, which obviously I know like that's the biggest insult you could get. But obviously he had the right intention. So I guess my question for you is, especially like you're in your 40s now, you like to train, you like to be active, be able, be athletic, but also not be like the broken dad with like bad knees. So, I mean, how does someone, even if someone maybe was like you, maybe they're a former athlete, they've enjoyed training hard, but they have started to run into like, man, like the stuff I was doing 5-10 years ago that I'm still trying to do, it's not working for me anymore. What does training for longevity look like in regards to, you know, just being able to stay athletic and stay able, and what needs to change as you transition from your 30s to 40s, or does anything need to change?
I don't think there's any hard set rule of something that needs to change. I think people need to really pay attention to what ceases being a good option for them individually. As an example, this is the dumbest thing ever for me in my head. Like I'm decently well versed in training and adjusting stuff. This is hard for me to wrap my head around. If I do light goblet squats with a kettlebell or dumbbell for like 3 sets of 10, I will have sore right knee for like a week. It just gets tight. However, if I do 280-pound Bulgarian split squats, go dunking, run on the track, and do all sorts of silly shenanigans that's on my IG, I feel great. The lowest level goblet squat pisses off my knee. It doesn't make a ton of sense, but it is the thing. And so I've just stopped doing a low level goblet squat. I get my bilateral squat out of a machine because it makes my knees feel better. I do a box squat because I manage the depth and it doesn't seem to piss off the knee. So at 43, I don't do a lot of bilateral squatting because it just is one thing that doesn't really do well for my knee. I bring that up as an example because I can still do a lot of cool stuff, but I've had to take out this fundamental thing. And rather than hyper fixating on, I got to figure out why I can't bilateral squat, I'm like, I don't really care. I'll get leg stimulus in a thousand other ways. Let me just not do the thing that's pissing it off. So my takeaway after the long example is the thing that's pissing off whatever body part, stop doing that thing. There's infinite numbers of exercises. There's not a single exercise that that a person has to do one variation of. And a lot of people buy into they need to do the thing. They got a back squat. They got to sprint. They got to whatever. It's a blank. Different schools of thoughts will teach you that it's this one thing you have to do in this one way. And more often than not, if that's pissing you off, every time you make it a little bit worse, you negatively impact everything else that you're doing. You never get better.
Yeah, I struggled with that for a long time. I mean, I used to do a lot of Olympic lifting, front squatting, back squatting, traditional barbell deadlifting. And at some stage, it just, and I think I shoved the square peg in the round hole for like years. And then finally realized, like, I think it's the bilateral squatting. And even for me too, like only to a point. There's certain times where I can rip two-legged, like bilateral, even hex bar, and it feels good. But oftentimes it's like the split stance and the single leg stuff, like I get zero issue with, and I can just crush hard. But it's taken me a long time to be okay with that.
Yeah, there's definitely a pride part, right? There's the being told, like there's the element of just I can't do the thing. Now I'm pissed that I can't do the thing. That's a standalone silo. Then there's a similar silo that's, well, now Joe thinks I'm a pussy because I can't back squat, right? So there's that trainer respect that everyone's trying to get by doing the same lift that others do to compare and feel good about yourself. There's that element that eventually you just stop caring about because the discomfort and pain from pissing off your body starts to finally be louder than the little bit of psychological trauma you have because you're not deadlifting with the boys anymore. Yeah, so I think those two psychological pieces right there screw with people until you're so uncomfortable that you're like, all right, I don't need to be dumb anymore. A lot of times it's not because, like when all the old guys, 40 and over, are selling you this, it's not because we all broke down necessarily. It's because we're all finally mature enough to be like, oh, I don't have to do that thing. And like the cute little 30s, young 30s guys that are like celebrating their low back soreness, like that's cool. I used to do that also. And then eventually the soreness turns into a little bit more than soreness, and then you're not celebrating it anymore.
Yeah. Well, to go from let's say the more intense crazies like you or maybe me or other trainers out there, how much is just enough? I know, especially with FitWall, I mean, you guys had 7 locations. I'm sure you guys had hundreds, if not thousands of members around the country you're programming for. And the general population, they may not be crazy like the enthusiasts, and they want to get in and work out. They want to get the benefits. So what do you think? Like, what is just enough for most people?
So I think just enough, bare minimum, is 2 challenging sessions a week if somebody actually wants to make any real tangible progress. So like one time a week, you could push back. People are like, well, one time a week is better. I'm like, yeah, if you went from 0, and it'll be better for a couple of months, and then then just reality. Now, if it's once a month with you in your gym and then they're active elsewhere doing other stuff, then that's a different discussion, right? Like if they come and see me for one full body strength training, but then they also do yoga and they walk and they do some sort of activity, then sure, we can ride that for longer. But eventually you stop making progress there and you need twice a week. It's just twice a week, two touch points of stimulus is going to fill that whole super compensation cycle a whole hell of a lot better than one time a week. The reason one time a week works for novices is because they're 100% novices. Anything is going to work for them for a period of time. If you actually want to make tangible progress 3 times a week plus, once you're at 4 and 5 times a week, then that's where you can really start to see quite quick results. I actually changed my tune. I used to like parrot the classic thing, you can't out exercise a bad diet. And then I got to own FitWall and write programs. We did have about 2,000 monthly members across all of them. And the people that would average 5 days a week, I stopped believing that you can't out exercise a bad diet because I started watching people do nothing with their diet and just get much better physical progress than I ever really thought was potential. And I guess I can throw that away. Now that's like a high flux thing, but they're just so much more active, doing so many more types of movements that they physically change pretty quick.
And so, I mean, for a lot of people that, do follow you or have gotten to know you over the years too, like obviously I feel like, you're associated with outside the box training. Some might call it kettlebells, landmines. You guys went and created, kind of a new take on kettlebell training with PPSC. So as far as like, kettlebells are versatile. What do they do? I guess what do they do better than barbells or dumbbells, especially maybe for someone who maybe they haven't really dabbled with kettlebells that much, or they're maybe of the camp of like, well, like what does that train? So like what's the benefit of playing with, even if it is just that 30% you talked about with kettlebells that you don't get from barbells and dumbbells?
So I think the first thing that comes to mind with kettlebells versus barbells. Barbells, you have to work your body around the barbell to fit it, to lift it. Whereas a kettlebell, you can fit it around your body. So those limitations, those aches, those pains, those things that happen to us that we were just talking about as we get older, as injuries accumulate, the kettlebell is more flexible in how you hold it and can utilize it. And so therefore you can move with less ouchies, boo-boos, discomfort that seem to happen to a decent chunk of the population with barbells. So that's number one, which I like. Number two, the ability to utilize it in many different positions, I think, is higher than a dumbbell because the dumbbell shape just doesn't lend itself to a rack position very well, or even putting on your shoulder very well. It just doesn't, it's just not as comfortable to move into a multitude of positions. The kettlebell, because you got the big round shape, you can put your hand under that and hold it really comfortably. It's more ergonomic with the double grip in certain positions. The way it sits on your shoulder, bicep, chest, wrist, hand makes it easier to hold. It doesn't make it easy to hold. It's easier to hold than a dumbbell. It hangs really nice because it's now a hanging weight versus the dumbbell, which can tip in many directions and runs into your thigh kind of funky. So it just ends up being a geometry problem that makes it more convenient for a lot of different things. The only caveat there is when it's sitting on your wrist, it can be uncomfortable for people to begin with, but that goes away after a couple sessions, or just wear a goddamn wristband, look cool, and be comfortable. We teach a number of variations that gets rid of the wrist contact so that people can just exercise with it immediately and get rid of that issue, which is really helpful in group classes. Like I teach an old person kettlebell class, and when I say old people, I don't mean me, I mean like average 67 and above
Yeah.
with negative kettlebell experience, and they do great with it. So comfort. Then the second thing is it allows you to transition from exercise type to exercise type really nicely with minimal equipment needs. You don't have to change weight a ton. So if I want to challenge my lower body, I can now swing it because of the longer shape away from the handle, creates this pendulum effect. I can get power-based training that involves no ground contact points, which we know we like in jumping and running, and etc. However, in a fitness context, a lot of times we can't manage that many ground contacts with our aging population, but we still want them to move fast. So kettlebell swings, kettlebell ballistics, clean snatches allow us to do that in a really safe and effective manner. Then we can just transition it to an upper body drill. They're just very versatile, right? In the trainer's toolbox, a barbell is like a screwdriver. It's good for screwing things in. Dumbbells probably have a little bit more utility. They definitely have more utility than the barbell. Maybe it's a hammer. The goddamn kettlebell is kind of like a Swiss Army knife. You're like, I guess I can do this, 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 and this. So that's why I like it, the versatility.
Why don't you think more people do more with it? Right. I mean, because obviously I know even just from, I haven't been able to attend one of the FKT events, but seeing how much more you guys are doing with it than the average person, even people who maybe have used kettlebells for a while, it seems like it's very much like, hey, there's just a couple of moves that everyone does with a kettlebell and not much more. Why is that?
Because there is a Russian monopoly on kettlebell education for a very long amount of time. And anyone that dare go against the dictator was sent to the gulag. Literally, they got excommunicated from the company because they started to question the teachings That's why you saw so many master instructors for RKC and Strong First excommunicated. They're like, hey, I don't think that makes sense. I would rather do it this way. And they're like, total company line, or you can't teach for us. So legitimately, that was it. Like, RKC was the kettlebell cert for 2000 to 2011 when it broke into Strong First and RKC. RKC doesn't do a ton anymore. Strong First is still a great company. They're both great companies. They teach really good education. But what they've chosen from their marketing branding is that we're hardstyle. We do it this way. This is the best way. We've been doing it for the longest time. So we are the most credentialed, which is factually true. They've been doing it for the longest time. They have the biggest reputation. So they're not wrong in saying it. They're just wrong, in my opinion, in saying that that's the only way you can go, that it's useful to do. They're fine if they set their standards for what they want to be passing out. Those are just arbitrary standards. Doesn't mean that they don't work. I don't really have much issue with the way they teach anything. I just think there's so much more that you can do. And so to say otherwise is disingenuous at best or lying at worst in order to say what you're doing is the thing. To me, everything hardstyle is be able. It's the basics. And truthfully, I don't think it's right in a lot of times for a lot of people because they teach everything as a non-rotating bilateral lift like it's a barbell. And I'm like, no, but it's a kettlebell. You can turn with this thing and it doesn't matter. Like, as that's one example. So
Yeah.
the reason that the industry, most people, what is the thing where you are trying to appease the status quo? Appeal to authority. So the appeal to authority was to fall in line with hardstyle standards. The reason that we're in a good time right now is COVID happened and a lot of people discovered kettlebells, and there were not live certifications for a year and a half there from the standard organizations because of COVID. And so all these people, I call them the kettlebell COVID babies, and they just found out that kettlebells are kind of fun. They started playing around with them. And so you've seen over the last 4 years, more expression of various stuff happen. And people are like, oh, this works out pretty well. And because there was no one there to strike down the uprising, it's taken hold a little bit. That's why you see something like Belfast be a successful event multiple times in a year. And that's why you see us, like we'll have 33 events this year. We did 35 events the previous year, 20 events the previous year. We averaged 24 people per event. I do 5 or 6 online kettlebell events per year with another 20 to 30 people. So, we got 1,000 people coming through a year plus on the kettlebell certs. And the thing that we hear the most is, what a refreshing take. That was really nice. We don't teach squats. We don't teach deadlifts. I don't waste anybody's time. Like, if you came to a cert and I spent 5 hours teaching squats and deadlifts, I'm an asshole. You already know how to do that. So we just do the other stuff with the kettlebell.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that. I'm going to take you into like rapid fire. Give me your first thought on a couple of things. First one, what's the most overrated exercise that just fucking everyone's talking about all the time?
The two-handed kettlebell swing.
Just led you right to it.
Yeah, and the reason for that, the limitation for so many people ends up being their grip. And that's not the target of the drill. And so if I can change and I'm saying the traditionally taught two-handed swing, if I can change the setup to have better overload on specific tissues or qualities, then I'll take that every single day of the week.
So would you say you prefer more staggered?
Yeah, kickstand is kickstand almost everything. This is a large generalized statement, but kickstand almost everything kettlebell works out better, I think, for people because most of the overload is limited to what they can deal with their grip or upper body. And so the accompanying lower body overload is minimal. And I'm like, cool, go to a single leg. Now we've solved it.
Is it kickstand or is it B stance?
It's definitely not B stance. Son of a bitch.
We won't go there. Okay. What's one exercise that you see yourself never giving up, that you see yourself doing forever?
Man, that's a good one. Bulgarian split squats.
I had a feeling that was going to be your answer. And then what's more important for long-term health, muscle or mobility?
I think for health, it's going to be muscle because without it, you can't do anything. You can be stiff and get around, But if you can't stand up out of a chair, I don't care if you can sit down there like slinky like. You got to have muscle and strength. It's hard to have one without the other and be pleasantly happy. But health, I think it's going to be so many health benefits from having actual lean tissue to utilize carbohydrate and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. And then my last one for you. You can give me the answer for you and then the answer for like the general population. They might be the same, they might be different. If you had to pick, train hard for 30 minutes a day or move casually for 8 hours a day, which one's better? Or which one would you choose? Choose for you and then choose for everyone else.
Um, I'm going to, okay, up until you're 60, move 8 hours a day. And then once you're 60, train intently for the 30. The reason I say that is maybe it's 50 instead of 60, is I've talked to a lot of people, I had a lot of clients that are incredibly active individuals, but once they reach a certain age, that activity is not enough to maintain the muscle mass and strength. They need a more specific overload to drive that adaptation and keep those qualities. If you're always active every single day, at a certain point, that's your baseline. It's no longer changing your homeostasis in any meaningful way. And so, yes, you're better off than the person that's doing nothing, certainly. And that's why I said up until that point, I think you'll get by with it. But anyone that pretends shit doesn't change as you age is just a dipshit. Things do change as you age. And I don't know if it's 50, because that's coming up in 7 years. I don't know if it's 60. Maybe our peptides will be great enough that it won't fucking matter at that point. But there's a certain age where you definitely need the specific strength or mobility or aerobic stimulus to make a change.
I dig it. And Cliff, I feel like you've maintained a relatively tame version of yourself today, which may be good if people haven't met you before. But I definitely personally connect with and enjoy your, I would just say, general non-dogmatic approach towards understanding the different ways of moving your body, exercise, fitness. I feel like that comes through along with a fair amount of humor in your social media version of you. Where can people best connect with you if they wanted to learn more, either just from you or learn more about what you're doing with the PPSC, the certifications and courses? Where are you most active?
At Clif Harski on Instagram. I can't handle more than one social media thing. Being a 43-year-old, just barely hanging on there. And our website, new URL, pain-free training.
Awesome. And if you guys are looking for those, I'll make sure that I link those up in the show notes so you guys can get a hold of Cliff. Cliff, I appreciate your time, brother. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.